I say this as someone who is not a fan of Doctor Strange. Didn't really like the first one. Is often very critical of the MCU and finds their movies to be repetitive and cheesy and silly. This may have been the best one since like freaking Iron Man. This was great.
Well, that was a movie.
Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm giving my first thoughts on Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. And in case you didn't know, this movie was directed by Sam Raimi. So it's the first time in a while, other than Taika Waititi taking on Thor, we've had a big name director, a director that has had success outside of Marvel, taking on an MCU movie. And so therefore, for the first time in a long time, we have a movie that feels like a movie. God damn it, we do! I've been very critical of the MCU in general because they all feel very formulaic, they all feel very much the same, even when you've got different directors coming in and out other than Jon Favreau's films and Taika Waititi's films. They all, for the most part, feel the same. You could argue James Gunn as well, but James Gunn still wasn't as much himself in Guardians of the Galaxy as, say, he was in Suicide Squad, because overall the MCU kind of molds everybody into a very accessible package, something that is very formulaic, something that works for everybody and isn't going to really offend anyone. That's what they're kind of known for. And so even though Jon Favreau doesn't really exit any of those areas, he still is a very qualified and a very good director. So his movies also kind of set the standard for the MCU. They were very good. And then Taika's movie, I'm not a fan of Thor Ragnarok, I'll be honest, but at least it felt different in a way. This movie, I don't want to say it's perfect or anything either, but holy shit, the MCU has never been close to this before. This is the furthest leap, the furthest departure the MCU has ever dared to take, and I am so grateful for it. There's still a problem with the writing in my mind. I think a lot of the ideas in this movie were really good, but weren't executed as well as they could have been because the writing was a little bit sloppy, it was a little bit rushed. Kind of like how I felt about the last Spider-Man movie. There was a lot of really good ideas and they weren't always executed as well as they could have been. And that's not always on directing, sometimes it's on the writing. Sometimes you've got a good story idea, but you don't know how to flesh it out in the writing, or sometimes you're just rushed. With this, I felt similarly. And I don't know if it was because the writing was poor or if they were just put in a tough situation trying to make this grand, extravagant movie and forcing it into a world that is so cookie cutter and so cheesy and has so many other things going on, because especially at the beginning, it felt like it was rushing through, just trying to get a bunch of stuff out there, and it didn't really work for me. Once this movie started getting going, it got really good in my mind, but there was still some really weak areas in there. And we're also still fighting against a lot of the cliche stuff that we put in all of these MCU and superhero movies in general, where it's just fight scenes don't always make sense, you know, we're throwing in these dumb one-liners that don't fit and can ruin the mood. So there's still some of that. Yes, I'm not trying to say this is a perfect movie, but it was one of the most enjoyable MCU movies of all time to me, and not because of the same things that made Spider-Man No Way Home enjoyable. I describe that movie as being one of the most joyful, enjoyable experiences in movie theater in my life, and it was because of just being fed all of this nostalgia. This movie doesn't do that, not in the same way, but it was entertaining because A, we've got a really good director doing things, taking risks, and B, it didn't just do everything else that every other superhero movie is doing. And frankly, parts of this movie had me scratching my head going, how the hell did they get a PG-13 rating for this? Part of this, some of the violence I thought warranted an R, a light R, but still an R. So I was kind of shocked at how far it went at some points. Grateful, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was badass. I adored the stylized violence of this, and the little tidbits of gore, and the quick angle shots, and the rotating camera. There were parts of this movie that honestly felt like they were ripped straight out of The Evil Dead, and I was so happy to see it. I understand this movie won't be for everyone, but that's why it's good. They're not trying to appeal to everyone. I mean, yeah, there's some parts that they're still forcing it into the box, the Marvel Disney box in some ways. They're still doing that. But the box has gotten a little bit bigger, or maybe the lid's just been taken off so it can leak out a little bit. They're letting some things go that they wouldn't have in the past, and that made it so much better. And yeah, I mean, I'm not a Benedict Cumberbatch fan. Wasn't a fan of the first Doctor Strange movie at all. I thought it was extremely boring and repetitive. It felt like an Iron Man repeat. Like they just took all this, like you've got this narcissist, really smart guy who's the number one guy in his field, and then he gets into a tragic accident, but that tragic accident leads to him becoming a superhero, and then he has to learn how to sacrifice his own wants and desires to better everybody else. It was the same exact thing. Oh, and he's also a white guy that's got a goatee and a mustache. Like it's like, it was really lame. I really didn't like the first one at all. But this was great. It's kind of like, it reminded me of when Chris Columbus handed over Harry Potter to Alfonso Cuarón. And yeah, sure, the first two Harry Potter films are fine. They're good even, but they're really polished. They're really neat. They've got a little bow tied on top of them. They're really family friendly, accessible to everyone. And then Alfonso Cuarón said, okay, but what if we made this fun? What if we made this interesting? That's what this felt like to me. Now, like I keep saying, yes, there's parts of this that I felt like Disney was like, hold on, let's just pull it back just a little bit. And there was parts where, I mean, they were obviously forced into a corner here, trying to tie all of these loose ends together from all of these different things. Like you've got WandaVision, you've got the Ms. Marvel TV show, you've got the previous Doctor Strange, you've got the Endgame, and you've got all of the Avengers movies, and you have to follow all of these story arcs that have already been set up by other people. So yeah, it's hard to get going. This had a bit of a rough start. There was a couple of moments in there that were just like, that didn't feel very good, or maybe there's a moment here or there that felt like this was just trying to be a little bit of fan service. I don't like fan service. I know I said No Way Home was fun, but it's like, it's fun, it's not a good movie. This movie at times was a really, really good movie. Better than maybe any other Marvel movie at its best, but it wasn't completely even throughout. There was times it faltered. So I think this movie at its best was the best MCU movie, but at its worst was just, you know, really bland and run-of-the-mill. It still is one of the best MCU movies in my opinion. I wouldn't say it's the best. I still leave that to Iron Man. I think that's the best, but I would put it in the Infinity War category. Like, it's up there. I thought it was really, really good, really well directed, and aside from a couple of things, like I don't like the girl playing Miss Marvel. I thought that she was iffy. Other than that, I thought the cast was really good. Benedict Cumberbatch, I'm not a fan of. I've said that and I keep saying it, but I thought he was fine in this. I enjoyed him enough, and then the rest of the cast was really good. I thought Elizabeth Olsen was fantastic. I think she really carried what was some great motivation, but some weak writing. Like the character arc of her is brilliant. She is probably my new favorite MCU villain, but the writing for it was weak at times, where like I really wanted to feel for her and I really wanted to be invested in her arc. Like, I care so much about what she cares about, but the writing was bland at times, which is a shame because of how good that character arc, how good that story is. So it didn't reach its full potential. This could have been, in my mind, the best MCU movie and one of the best superhero movies of all time, and it fell a little bit short of what I was hoping for it to be, but it was still wildly entertaining and imaginative and easily the most attractive to look at MCU movie I've ever seen. Like, visually captivating. The directing, the cinematography, the visuals, the storyboarding behind it must have been wild, because like what you actually see in this movie puts everything else the MCU has ever done to shame. So I'm gonna get into spoilers now. I know that was quick, but there's a lot to talk about in spoilers that I didn't want to give anything away if you didn't want anything given away. So please just go see it. Don't take your kids to see it if they're under like 13, maybe 12. I don't know. This movie is not made for little kids, so don't take your little kids. There was audible gasps in the audience when certain things happened, and it lets you know pretty soon, pretty early on, like, hey, we're going to have some heavy visuals here. So yeah, don't take little kids to see it. If they want to see it, as a parent, you should see it first and then decide if they should see it. I wouldn't just take them to it. If you took them opening night, sorry, you shouldn't have done that. But if you're older than that and you're interested in that, please go see it. I was so entertained by it. I enjoyed it so much. So definitely a recommendation for me. So yeah, if you don't want anything spoiled, please click away now. But also remember to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye. So spoilers. Yeah, so the Scarlet Witch thing, I really enjoyed that whole arc. She is, if you saw WandaVision, or if you haven't seen WandaVision, she is trying to get to a universe now where she can get that perfect life that she was creating. She was enslaving this town and making this fantasy world. Now she's like trying to get to another universe in the multiverse that she can just get rid of that Wanda and replace her and live her happy, perfect life there. But she needs Miss Marvel to get her there because she's the only way that she knows how to get to another universe. I love that story. I love that idea. I love that concept because, yeah, you feel for her. She feels betrayed. She feels like every other universe in the multiverse is a better version of her life than the one that she's trapped in now. So it's very emotional. It's very powerful. But some of the writing was just sloppy here. Like, some of it was just really glossed over. Some of it was silly. And I felt like they were constantly toning her down, and I guess that was the point, was if she just went full force, she could just kill everybody. But there's this one scene in particular where she's in the multiverse, and you've got this fun little cameo thing where you've got John Krasinski playing Mr. Fantastic, and you've got Patrick Stewart returning as Charles Xavier, and so she is trying to get to the girl there defending her, so she has to kill all of them, and she kills the two guys really quickly, and then she has to go against the two women, which is the Peggy, Captain America, and then some alternate version of Captain Marvel. And for some reason, the two women are so much harder to kill than the two men. It's like, it's so Disney that you just throw up in your mouth a little bit, where it's like, oh, those two most important member. Like, I mean, it's like, in this version, John Krasinski, at least he acted like he was like the most important Avenger or whatever. Like, he stood in the front and was like, we're stopping you. Like, he's the one talking, and then he dies in 1 second. And then the other guy, he gets killed in a very graphic way, by the way. I enjoyed it. It almost felt Zack Snyder / James Gunn-esque, which was like, wow, that's in a PG-13 movie. Okay, anyway. And then she has to then kill the other two, and it's like, it's a Captain America. Captain America would have been so easily killed by somebody with magic powers, but for some reason it's really difficult now. Like, it took her a really long time. And then same thing, I mean, yeah, Captain Marvel is the most, I think, powerful Avenger outside of the Scarlet Witch. But still, if you've got those magic powers, what is Captain Marvel going to do against that? Apparently a lot. You can do a lot with just like punching and laser and flying and whatever. So it's just, it was really lame that like Disney had that agenda or whatever. But anyway, so there's just silly stuff in this movie that it's just kind of lame. There's a lot of lame moments. Like, there's another part briefly after that where they're running away and they're going down this tunnel and they're closing all these blast doors, and she's just, bam, that one's gone, bam, that one's gone, bam, that one's gone. And then they close one right before she gets there, which, I mean, that's what all the other ones did. But all of a sudden now she can't open that one, and they're all like, where'd she go? And then she appears there, and it's this fun little jump scare horror type thing, which was fun, but it was so stupid. It's like, one, why didn't she just blast through that one like she did the other ones? And two, why are you sitting there gasping for air like you don't need to be running somewhere right now? You're trying to get away. So yeah, there's a lot of really stupid stuff. Also, the humor. There's classic MCU humor throughout all of this, and it's mostly bad. but the visuals behind it, oh, I adored it. Like, I mean, Doctor Strange is able to use this book, this like demonic book that good guys shouldn't use because it will make you go evil essentially, but he has to use it in order to beat the Scarlet Witch. So he does, and what he has to do is he then possesses an alternate reality version of himself, but that alternate reality version of himself is dead, so he's like a zombie version of himself. They show it briefly in the trailer, but that whole thing, because if this is against the rules, like he's breaking the code, and so you've got these spirits of the damned that are like telling him to stop, like you will suffer the consequences here. And so there's all of this demonic imagery there that's like you have never seen and will probably never see in any other version of the MCU, something like this. But that's what Sam Raimi's gonna bring, and it was beautiful, and I adored it. So there's a lot of cool imagery like that they're taking risks with stuff like that. I mean, also there's this alternate reality that's been, I forget the term they use, but like when two universes collide, two versions of the multiverse collide, and then everything goes haywire. So he goes to one, and the Doctor Strange there is already evil, but the whole universe looks so cool because it's like almost like Inception, when like the universe is falling apart, and then you've got the sanctum, but it's like in disarray, and you've got the staircase leading up into the clouds, and that was so visually cool. And then you've got this other part with Charles Xavier where he goes into the mind of Wanda trying to rescue her from the alternate reality version that has possessed her. I know this is a lot of heavy stuff that's kind of hard to understand if you haven't seen it, so probably just go see it if you haven't, and if you have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. So he goes into her mind, and it was the most beautiful shot, I think, in any MCU movie ever, by like far. Like, I mean, in Infinity War and Endgame, you've got a couple of cool scenes, like you've got the shot with Thanos when he's in the middle of the water or whatever. Like, there have been some cool shots in the MCU. They're few and far between, but they are there. But this shot, it's just like all white, and Charles walks through this door, and then there's this little pile of rubble that Wanda is stuck underneath because she's been, you know, taken over by the Scarlet Witch. And then the Scarlet Witch is just, red cloud comes billowing in behind him, and then she appears behind him and like snaps his neck. And there's a couple of different things here with her that are really creepy and really cool. Like, there's this other part where she's attacking the base, the good guy base, where all of the sorcerers are. I'm sorry, I don't know the terminology of what Doctor Strange's group is called, because I never cared about Doctor Strange before. But anyway, they've got this shield up, like the Battle of Hogwarts. They're all using their magic to keep this dome around them. So she can't get through, so she has to like mess with their minds. So she finds like the guy that's weakest mentally, and then she's like speaking into his mind, but how they show that is she appears behind him and like whispers in his ear, and it was so cool. Like, that stuff is not done in the MCU. I've never seen the MCU come close to anything that cool. This movie was cool. Like, I've never said that about an MCU movie before, ever. Like, yeah, I enjoy Iron Man. I enjoyed the Spider-Man movies somewhat. They weren't cool. This was cool and creepy and eerie, and just like I said, the directing was awesome. I've never seen a movie that looked this good in the MCU. Like, you've got camera tricks, you've got fun angles. Like, there's this part where one of those little demon cloud things attacks Rachel McAdams' character, and it was like a cheesy 90s, maybe even 80s trick where like you just shove the camera in her face and she grabs the front of it, and like, but it looked fun. Like, we're doing things, we're trying things, we're not just like setting up the camera on a tripod and saying action. Like, we are directing, like there's direction happening here. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed how this movie looked, how it felt. There was the unfortunate aspects of this movie where they were, you know, forced to feel like the MCU at times. And yeah, you've got the dumb jokes and you've got the sloppy writing at times, but it's forgivable. This movie was good. One of the best MCU movies in my opinion. I really do mean that. I enjoyed this movie a lot. It's not perfect. Definitely not. I mean, it's not like The Dark Knight or Logan or anything. Like, those movies are still, to me, the pinnacle of superhero comic book movies. But like I said, this is approaching Iron Man, this is as good, if not better, than Infinity War, in my opinion. I'm satisfied. Like I said, my expectations weren't quite met, but I'm still satisfied. I still enjoyed it. It still gave me what I wanted, including a Bruce Campbell cameo. The cameos in this, I will say, I felt two ways about it. They felt a little forced for sure, but they didn't feel as gimmicky as I thought they would have. I almost started hoping that they weren't going to happen at all. Other than I wanted Tom Cruise as Iron Man, which didn't happen, which surprised me. But like, I knew Patrick Stewart was going to be in there. I didn't know John Krasinski was going to be in here as Mr. Fantastic, but he was. And I was kind of like, well, that's kind of lame. But I think having them die and not be there as much of a gimmick, but be there because they're in the multiverse, so it makes sense that they should be there, and then die quickly. That was fine. It did feel a little bit gimmicky, but it could have been a lot worse, so I was fine with it. Patrick Stewart being there really kind of didn't work, though, honestly. Like, he felt like an afterthought, because this universe that they're in currently, that has John Krasinski and Patrick Stewart, they don't trust Doctor Strange because he went bad in their universe. Trying to do good, he ended up being consumed by evil and doing bad things. So they don't trust this current Doctor Strange because they think he's going to do the same thing. So then they're like, all right, we're going to decide your fate. But then Scarlet Witch comes, so the group of them goes to fight her. Meanwhile, Patrick Stewart and one of the other guys is still there, and they're like, we don't trust you, but we're gonna wait for them to come back and vote. And then Patrick Stewart goes, you should save her and run away. And you're like, what? Where did that come from? Like, that just didn't fit at all to me. I know Patrick Stewart, he's the smartest one, and so that's why he thinks that. I know he's not like scientifically as smart as Mr. Fantastic. I'm not saying that. Like, he's the smartest one, not most book smart, he's just the smartest one. So him seeing through that and trusting him, sure, I get that, but it's one of those things where it's like, it wasn't earned. So much of this was sloppy and quickly done, and so it just didn't work for me. If you had some sort of development there happen, okay, like maybe them talk, him ask him a question, but no, it just went from, we're going to judge you because this happened. I'm going to show you what happened, so now you know why we're judging you. Yeah, you should run away. Like, it was just kind of lame. So, yeah, this movie had a couple of trip-ups, a couple of slip-ups in here where they just, a couple of moments just felt lame, like the opening especially. You had this alternate reality version, and I get that it's like, we need to catch everybody up and show us what's going on so we can be invested, but it just, the action in that moment was really lame and really weird, and so I was kind of like, is this really how this movie's gonna feel? Like, this is awful. And it didn't feel like that. So I guess just that opening was odd, but it felt like a transition of like, we're going to start in how MCU normally feels, and then we're going to slowly move into Sam Raimi's MCU. So that transition was a little bit rough, but once we got into Sam Raimi's world, oh, it was beautiful, and I loved it. I loved it. And I almost kind of expected this movie to feel like a Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, because we've never seen Sam Raimi do superheroes other than Spider-Man. This didn't feel like that, other than the occasional, like, he still does like the cheesy 90s, early 2000s version of making superhero movies. Like, there was like some cheesy style in there that it felt like Spider-Man, but for the most part, it felt more like his horror movies than it felt like his superhero movies. I'm grateful for that, and I understand why he did that. I just kind of expected in the back of my head somewhere that it was going to feel kind of like Spider-Man, and it didn't really. So yeah, like I said, definitely recommend it. If you've seen it, let me know what you guys thought of it. Did it live up to your expectations, or were you completely dashed? I enjoyed it. It definitely was, like I said, like a step below what I was hoping for, but I'm still satisfied with it. I still enjoyed it. I still think it's better than 99% of the MCU. So yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It was gory. Yeah, really, it surprised me. Like, parts of this really felt like it could have been R. But I guess it wasn't. I don't know. I don't know what Disney pulled to get the PG-13 rating. Like, it wasn't a hard R. Like, it would have been a soft R. Like, it would have been, like, barely an R. But I still felt like it deserved it. So I guess Disney probably pulled a couple of strings and like, we don't want this. Don't make this R. And there was a shot in there especially where, so how Scarlet Witch kills Captain America is she uses her shield and throws it through her. And there's this, like, less than a second clip of the shield stuck in the wall after it sliced through her, dripping blood. And it was like, oh my God, okay. That shot was probably forced to be shorter. Like, that probably originally was longer, and then they were forced to edit that down to keep the PG-13 rating. Speaking of weird things, by the way, Wanda can fly, right? Like, she flies all the time. But after killing all these people, there's glass on the floor, and she just walks barefoot on it and cuts her feet up. And so then when she's chasing them down this hallway that I had just talked about with the closing doors, she's limping, and that's why she can't catch them. It's like, one, you can fly, so you can be flying right now with injured feet, and two, you could fly before, so you didn't have to injure your feet. You're just stupid. So, yeah, there's silly, stupid things in here that don't make sense, but visually captivating. Like nothing the MCU has ever done before, and I adore it for that. I really do. So, yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought, and of course, don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye. I also wanted to mention real quick, Patrick Stewart, Charles Xavier, died again. He has died. Charles has died so many times now. He can't stop dying. When he showed up, I was like, well, they're not gonna kill him. They can't kill him. He's already had his big dramatic death. Like, yeah, he died in X-Men 3 or whatever, but him dying in Logan was the time that he died for good. It's like, nope, we're gonna kill him again. Okay. And to me, I guess, honestly, that means that they're not afraid to, you know, undo big, important endings like that. So maybe they would bring back Hugh Jackman, at least for a cameo or something at some point. You would think they would have done it by now if they're going to do it, though. I don't think he wants to come back, but this makes me optimistic that maybe they would, honestly, which I would enjoy seeing. Also, another side note here. Disney or whoever is marketing this movie, they don't know what they're doing. And I guess they don't know what to do with it, because this movie, when I sat down to watch the trailers, the first trailer that came on was for the new Minions movie. The very next trailer was for Jordan Peele's Nope. What is the demographic you're trying to reach here with those two options? Like, I guess you're like, yeah, little kids are gonna watch this movie because it's the MCU, but really this is kind of like a horror movie. It's Sam Raimi. It's kind of weird. So, I mean, you'll probably get people that want to see this also wanting to see Nope. I get it, but like, you're scarring the children. If you are putting the Minions trailer here, you're saying, yeah, people of this age demographic should watch this movie. That's a lie. Kids that were watching Minions should not be watching this movie, and certainly should not be watching Nope. Anyway, my 2 cents.